Good evening, everyone, to the Ad Hoc Site Evaluation Committee meeting. Let's call the meeting to order at, I should look at my 6:04 p.m. And Emily, will you please take attendance?
Yes. Chair Karen Askey,
Here.
Vice Chair Mary Hefty.
Here.
Committee Member Ronnie Krasinski. Oop, is this members? No. I'm sure did. He declined, but. Okay, we'll go again. Ronnie Krasinski.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Ronnie. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Committee Member Carter Ward.
I'm here in spirit.
Committee Member Nona Chiariello.
Here.
Committee Member Jocelyn Gray. And Committee Member Karen Batra is absent.
Thank you. And I believe we need to let everybody know that Ronnie Krasinski is attending remotely. And it was published in our agenda that he is down in San Diego. And I think, Ronnie, we have to ask you some questions. First of all, can you hear us? I think Emily's got the questions for you.
I'm ready.
Great. Ronnie Krasinski, are you currently at 3785 Oceanfront Walk in San Diego, California?
Yes,
Have you posted outside of the establishment that there is a meeting being held?
yes,
Are there any attendees from the public currently with you at this time?
no.
Okay, that's the end of the question.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to item 2, oral communications for items not on the agenda. Do we have any comments from the public?
There's no public here.
There's a number of people on Zoom right now.
Currently, no hands are raised on Zoom.
Okay, well, then I'll go. Patty, what is happening on March 8th, 2025?
Parks and Rec Committee is so excited to announce that on March 8th, Saturday, 7 o'clock at the Community Town Hall, we will be having the most looked forward event of the year so far, until the next Parks and Rec event, which is a music trivia night. Now, if you think you don't know anything about music trivia, you're wrong. You do. And it's not just going to be like name that tune. It's going to be about, what bands were doing this song and, what are some lyrics. It's just going to be a lot of fun. And, you should just show up because we're all going to have fun regardless. We're going to have fun. I mentioned we're going to have fun. We're going to have fun.
All right, thank you, Patty. Any other comments from the public for things not on the agenda? Okay, moving on to item 3, approval of the minutes of February 3rd, 2025. Does anyone have any comments? Oh, I do. Very minor. It is under item 4 committee discussion when we get to Portola Corridor Town Center. This is really minor, Patty, but there's a bullet point that should be for Our Lady of the Wayside. But otherwise, I thought these were fabulous. Thank you.
Amazing.
Okay, motion to approve the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes.
We'll do a vote. Chair Karen Askey,
Yes, approve.
Vice Chair Mary Hefty,
Aye.
Committee Member Ronnie Krasinski,
Yes.
Committee Member Carter Ward, Committee Member Nona Riello,
Yes.
Committee Member Jocelyn Gray. Karen is absent. Motion passes to approve minutes.
Thank you. Are there any, well, are there any comments from the public on the minutes? I guess I should have asked that. It's too late. Okay. Well, they were so good, I'd be surprised. Okay, item 4, committee discussions, site updates. I'd like to start with if there are any updates from the Portola Alpine Corners group. Okay, no updates there. So we're on to Alpine, Los Trancos, Skyline, and Nona and Mary. We'll leave it to you. Okay. See, Emily, can you bring up what looks like page 23? So last Friday, Ronnie, Mary, and I met with Garth Walker, who is the general manager and COO of the Alpine Hills Tennis and Swimming Club, to talk about potential options to work with them on affordable housing. The map that you can see here has the 3 parcels that Alpine Hills has. They're in total 9 acres. They are interested in working with the town, if it would benefit both the town and Alpine Hills, to come up with some kind of a housing solution. There would have to be no net loss of recreational amenities, possibly even a gain. They don't have a particular plan in mind, but it would likely not be accessed from Alpine Road or affect the largest parcel, which is the northernmost parcel, but rather it would be accessed from Los Trancos Road, most likely. And the sewer access is also on Los Trancos Road. We talked about various things, nothing specific, just sort of kind of brainstorming. And it seemed that they have thought about this a little bit because they were approached by a developer after our housing element was decertified. They were approached by a developer who I believe wanted the whole thing. And they turned that down. They're not interested in that. They want to keep Alpine Hills. But they are open to some kind of a plan. Mary, do you want to take it?
I suppose the rest of the subjects are not really up to us to decide, but they did want to have available parking. And so it would probably require, like a lot of the other things, a parking structure. And they're envisioning having recreation on top of the roof of the parking structure, which would be good. And then keeping the pickleball courts away from the residents because they're noisy. So you can see they've made permanent pickleball courts there, and they'd move those over to the tennis courts, and then the housing would fit in somewhere there. I don't think they ever discussed the whole lot, but I could be wrong about that. And they can't make any decision, just like MOSD can't make any decisions without the board certifying. So all this is completely preliminary. And certainly they're not, they're just responding in a positive way as a partner with the town. They're trying to be helpful, which we greatly appreciate. So, yeah, it was a nice opening. It certainly is an interesting one. They do have a lot of employees there, as many as 100 during the summer, a lot of whom are locally housed already. But so that would have some advantages there for them. They're not interested in being in charge of the building, etc. They'd want it to be vetted out some fashion, either leased or whatever, what other options that might be available. And the business about being approached by a developer, it was the letters that went out to everybody. There were 50 letters that went out in a flurry for almost all of Alpine. And there were many people who called and said, what is this? And a few people investigated it, but it made people realize that there was money to be had from affordable housing.
Well, and also a risk to the town that there might be a builder's remedy. So I think that was part of the take home.
Yeah, part of the reason they didn't want to. And they're happy to cooperate with us in whatever way. It's helpful
Yeah.
for both of us.
And they're concerned about neighbors. So I think one of the things about the creek and the setback that also benefits some of the neighbors in terms of noise.
Ronnie, do you want to comment at all? Or I don't know if you were in the meeting or not.
Who was?
I was, yeah, I guess maybe it's somewhat reiterating, but so it would likely require another party to do the actual development. I mean, that they're not interested in, being the housing developers themselves, most likely. And then just reemphasizing that, it doesn't necessarily mean that they would sell a portion of the property, but that might be a possibility. That would really all have to be determined over time with, with the development plan. And I think the other question for us, which is important, is the number of units. And I think we don't have that strong understanding of, how many units could be supported. It would really depend on the particulars of the project that would come into formation. They seem very open to, consider sort of any options that would meet the town's needs, as well as their own. In terms of, whether or not we could put 50 units on a portion of that site, would really need to be studied further, I think. Could probably pretty easily see, something like 10 to 20 units. 50 might be a lot given the, the constraints in terms of how much land may be available. But, maybe it's possible. I think we just don't know without sort of further analysis of, actual scenarios.
Is it appropriate for me to? Oh, we've been told before that you can do an RFP without owning the property. So one could move right ahead to an RFP and move it in front of Dorothy Ford Park with requesting an RFP on the property without necessarily owning it. Then you'd know what the options were a little bit in more detail.
Terrence, are you is Terrence Grindle here to?
He's apparently not one of the participants in the Zoom meeting.
Ask for his
Yeah, we
opinion
can-
on
we
that,
can-
but
we
we'll
can-
have to follow up.
That's
on
what we've been
that.
told before. We
Okay.
don't have to, we can do it on things that we're considering.
Okay.
And of course, you can also contact an affordable housing group and see what they think about the lot before, with the permission of the owner.
Okay. I think what I would like to do on this particular subject, because this is a new subject and the rest of our subject matter isn't, is I'd like to take committee questions now and public questions and then a discussion about this site. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay. The committee, do you have any questions for this subcommittee? Okay, I do. I'm wondering if you guys, when they talk about helping the town and also Alpine Hills meeting their needs, did they discuss what those needs were? Is it
Yeah.
affiliate? Hang on. Is it affiliate housing? Are they looking to help housing for their workers at all? Mary, you just mentioned a financial gain. But just if you can share anything that you might have learned in that as to what does it mean to help Alpine Hills? Obviously, we know what it means to help the town.
Some of their employees do travel a long distance to get to work, so it would benefit some of their employees to have housing on site. I got the sense that they don't want to be Alpine Hills doesn't want to be the one that develops that housing. But I think they would have, would be pleased if some of the employees could benefit from that. I really got the sense that they're willing to sort of just discuss and explore ideas, but nothing has been, established about, numbers, different possibilities for layouts, whether to redraw parcel boundaries or any of that stuff. And there is some concern about like not starting rumors about Alpine Hills going away or something like that. So we want to be really careful to make it clear that this is just exploratory.
I think, I mean, they might be, somewhat interested in housing for their employees, but I don't think that, I didn't have the sense that that was like a main motivation in terms of helping Alpine Hills. I do think it was potentially financial, if they could get a financial benefit from the housing development.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question, Carter. You may be able to answer this. I was thinking that of an affiliate overlay, but I don't know how that would work or could this work in this case? And Carter, do you know much about affiliate overlays?
I know too much about it, but I didn't know this was coming up. So I didn't advise anybody of my need to recuse myself. But if you look at the top of that drawing, there's a 1-foot strip along what is kind of old Alpine or kind of Creek Park, and I have a client that owns that, so I need to recuse myself on this item.
That part right there where the hand is,
I can't see. Yes, right there.
that's a long way from what we're talking about.
Well, but it's not a long ways from the property. It's directly adjacent.
And
So I need to recuse myself and not discuss this item.
okay, and I'm a member of Alpine Hills.
So am I.
Do I need to recuse myself for that?
I think that
Emily?
in the past, the town attorney has made it clear that your membership, is a minority share, is one of 700 or 770. Typically isn't a problem, but I need to recuse because my client owns that, and I'm proposing, a replacement bridge, along Old Alpine.
Okay.
So I will be recusing myself.
Okay, Thank you. Emily, did you want to say something?
Yes, normally we ask if there's financial or familial ties, and our legal team would discuss after. But I also trust Carter's experience as well, and that sounds like sound advice.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee?
But Carter, that you don't have to, you can still ask questions. And hear discussion.
I think in light of, you know, being clear, you know, from a Fair Political Practices Commission standpoint, it's best for me, you know, to not have public comments about this issue.
To not hear public comments.
Not, for me, not to make public comments.
Okay.
You know, and not to ask questions, because questions are leading. And I think that, it's, you know, I don't feel comfortable.
Okay. And I just want for clarification, because there's three different parcels, the discussion focused primarily on the lower two parcels. Is that correct?
That's right.
That's all we're talking about.
Okay. All right. Are there any comments
Although
from,
we did discuss that it would be awfully nice to be able to square out that parcel above. Yeah,
oh, well, you mean the a separately owned piece of property? Yeah. let's
Never
not go
mind.
there. Okay. Are there any more committee questions for clarification? Okay, let's open it up for any public comment regarding the Alpine Hills Tennis and Swim Club site.
David Cardinal, you're allowed to speak.
Hi, thanks. I'm a 35-year member and 3-year former president of Alpine. I think this is just fantastical unicorn stuff, honestly. The club is charging now $60,000 per new member, for good or bad. $6,000 a year per family to stay a member. And we're at our max impervious surface. We want to add more tennis courts and pickleball courts, and we can't. I know I talked to Garth after you met with him, and he said, yeah, you know, he's a go along, get along kind of guy. And he said, like he said to everyone, he said, I'm happy to talk about things that help Alpine. But I see zero chance that any member vote would ever, at this point, we talked about selling that bottom lot like 20 years ago when we were in dire straits, but we're not. I mean, you could argue about our budget, but we're not. I do think if it was 5 or 10 units of affiliate housing for our workers, yeah, that's plausible. But there's not a lot of space between the creek setback and the club. If you want to do something similar, the quote Lee property on the corner is an acre and a half. It's been for sale for most of the last 25 years. It's on Alpine Road. The access on Las Trancas Road, as we know from the Hawthorns, is dangerous and shouldn't be expanded. So I don't know, if you want to buy a property, buy the Lee property. It's on the corner across from a not gas station, but a garage, and it has super willing owners. So I don't know. I mean, you do whatever you want, but I think there's 0% chance of anything happening with Alpine based on my experience. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any other comments?
No other hands are raised at this time.
Okay, well then hi, Terrence. Welcome. Let's open this up for one question. Terrence, were you in this meeting regarding Alpine Hills? That was one of my questions. Okay. Let's open it up for any committee comments about the Alpine Hills property. Anything? Okay. I I guess I'm the only one talking at this meeting today, or I feel that way. But interestingly, I was doing some research regarding the Fogarty property and trying to find out where folks worked in town. And as you remember, the last meeting, I had spoken with Ron Ramies, who said he's got employees coming from South San Francisco, Modesto, Placerville, Morgan Hill, Santa Cruz Mountains, and Ben Lomond. So they're obviously traveling a great distance when we're looking at folks' commute time. And what I learned regarding the Alpine Hills employees is there's about 80 regular staff members, and over half of them are living in places like San Jose, Santa Cruz, Sunnyvale, Tracy, Turlock, Manteca, Half Moon Bay. So again, one of the things that I really would love to see if we can pursue further is really truly understanding the local employees that are servicing our town and our residents and how long their commutes are. I think that would be really beneficial because and it made me realize the other thing that I want to say, and this is sensitive information, so I'm not going to get into any great detail, but I also asked Garth if he could share with me income ranges of these employees and to better understand how many might qualify for this type of housing. And this is directional only because he can only share what one individual in a household makes, right? From Alpine Hills, there could be other individuals in a household. So I looked at the income ranges just for individuals, and looking at that, the median range is 109,000 to 130,000 for 2024. I'm rounding. And 73 out of 80 employees were below that median. So we need to understand that we have a community of employees here who we love, and we do need to figure out how to provide housing for them and to keep them here and to be a part of our community. So I'm just going to throw that out as something that I learned. And I'd love to see some type of affiliate housing if we could do it. I think the Priory example of those there's a 6-unit, I don't know if it's a townhouse or condos or whatever, is something that could easily fit in a piece of that property, right? There's 6, maybe it's 10. You know, Carter, you know what I'm talking. I know you can't. Sorry, I'm making it hard since you can't really comment. But something like that I could really see. And with respect to the property to the, if that's the east side of Alpine, there's a fault line that unfortunately runs through that. Because I was also on the board of Alpine and we looked at purchasing that property. So I just want to,
The Lee property?
the Lee property, yeah. It would have to be looked at because you certainly can build in certain places on it, but you need to remember that there is a fault line that goes through it that would restrict some building. So,
On the other hand, it could be used for recreation.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
Right.
if we're doing lot line changes, which this would require lot line changes,
yeah.
you could do that for them. And I don't know what the zoning is for the Lee property.
Yeah. So those are my comments on that.
Could I comment on,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I think it's relatively, I believe it's relatively easy for the town to add someone to the affiliate housing program. I mean, someone that's a business owner in town. But for it to work, you need a affiliate that wants to develop housing, I think. And I think, you know, both for Alpine Hills and I think the same thing for Fogarty, that they don't want to develop the housing. So, I mean, we can, you know, recommend to add these sites to our affiliate housing program, but I don't see how that's going to help lead to housing development.
Since this is not directly related to this property, I wanted to talk about, a couple things that I find problematic, in the way the town's pursuing both affiliate housing, and the zoning for housing. For affiliate housing to work, and also kind of almost any housing, to work, the town needs to help property owners, and business owners, and institutions understand, the value, that they could potentially, see, in participation. I said this, in my comments, but, right now, if we ask anybody, it's not dissimilar to having your toenails pulled when you ask them, would they like to build housing? Because, of, the potential political backlash, and, and the potential effect on people's businesses and their relationships. So, it's not directly related to, what this committee is, been charged to do. But I do think we need to, communicate directly, to the council that, if you're really serious about, planning for housing, whether it's affiliate housing or, direct zone housing, you need to be able to show what the incentives, would be, both financially, and, from a process standpoint. So they can actually start to understand, what a good deal this would be, to do something. Because without it, within the town's, political and, social environment, I think it's going to be really hard to convince anybody to lean out over their skis, to sign up for anything. The other thing that I find completely abominable, is, what HCD is required, as a consequence, of, their, I believe, extortion to get housing, is, mandating minimums, within the zoning district, that doesn't allow existing uses, to continue to be improved, when you zone something, mixed use, or, or multifamily. And, that's the kind of stuff that, in other states, I've never seen. There's always been a way to, when, if you're looking at a planning strategy for a community, you'd say, well, we would like this to happen, over some period of time. And that period of time, isn't geologic, but it's probably in the neighborhood of, 20 to 50 years. You would want to gestationally, see, an area of town become more commercial, an area of town to become more industrial, or an area of town to become, more residential. And essentially I'm responding, to Jocelyn's comments about, planning. If you're really planning, you plan, and you would say these, you would look at it as a planning diagram and say, well, we've got, these, arterial corridors, and these are the things that we want on the sides of these, and then transition into the open spaces, and, into the areas of, of greater topographic and geologic, consequences. These kinds of mandates that, HCD is putting on, towns to have minimum, it is actually the antithesis. It actually creates the antithesis of what they're trying to do. No property owner is going to want to do that if they've got an ongoing business that they might want, to continue to operate. And so the level of frustration that I have with this, is only further amplified every time I think about it. Because I support the effort, of planning, for housing. I actually support the effort of planning for, a more sustainable town, so that we can get things like, entertainment and, and more alternatives, for dining and, to get a drugstore back in town and a variety store. And I mean, some of the things that used to be here. I mean, there used to be a gas station, at the Village Square. There was a grocery store at the Village Square. These are things that zoning, has actually started, has actually been, caused a degradation, in the opportunities, for towns to do so. Because the property owner says, well, I'm only gonna be interested in what I can do now. And if you rezone it, I can't do that. So whether we, start to pursue it, as, thinking about it as a general plan diagram, that then backs into, giving people the opportunity to do something, inside of the general plan. But the whole zoning issue, of forcing us to parcelize and zone, a property for a minimum density, I think, is gonna kill the opportunity, for housing. Because property owners are gonna say, not me. And it's part of the reason that I suggested some other alternatives in my comments, and I'll defer that until we get to that.
Okay, thank you, Carter. Any other comments regarding the Alpine Hills site?
I'd like to just follow up on what Carter said, because it does apply to Alpine Hills in that I at least don't know what to tell people what the benefits are of doing affiliate housing. Like how much would it help them financially even to do that? And I don't know if there's a rule of thumb or if it's, very site specific for each property. So in that sense, I have felt ill-equipped in some of the conversations that we've had to try and convey what the benefits might be.
Well, with other, affiliate, housing organizations that I've worked with, in Portola Valley, their the principal goal of affiliate housing for them, is to be able to solicit better talent than they would normally be able to, secure, and be able to give them a leg up, to moving out of affiliate housing, as their careers, grow in the Bay Area. They see it as a stepping stone, not as an end all. But it's, it really has been, particularly in the case of the Priory, it's to get better people, who, because of where they're at, either geographically, or financially, wouldn't have the opportunity to come to the Bay Area, any other way.
And this may be a question for Terrence. If Alpine, if we were to consider Alpine for, a low income housing, is there I know that Ladera Church is using Habitat for Humanity. Is there a model out there where we could put, let's say it's 8 to 10 units? I mean, we're not talking about 50 on one site that is viable? Is it, I guess I'm just trying to explore how could we move forward with this?
And while you're answering that question, if you could just throw in there the question about how we use at market. What Habitat for Humanity has told me is that they want to have buy-in so that people are already stepping up, and without necessarily buying the land, you could have some input, some economic foot in the ground. Is there a way that we could integrate that kind of thinking into this kind of site, so that the landowner doesn't lose any land and the employees actually get some collateral into the business. And we move ahead with a plan. Because what I was alleging you have told me in the past was that we can go ahead and do an RFP on property we don't own. And that is a way that we can move ahead.
Yes, I'll try to answer both questions. Yes, you can do, I mean, obviously you'd want to be in partnership with the property owner in some way. You don't want to do it against their will. But yes, you don't need, this is not about acquiring property. This is about facilitating the development. So you could do an RFP. You could do an RFP on a piece of property. I'm not that familiar with the requirements of affiliated housing. But I can't see any reason why it would be a problem here if they wanted to do some housing, certain, number of housing units to, for their staff. As has been done in other parts, Prairie has been shown as an example. So it's certainly possible. They doesn't look like they have a lot of space for it, but it's entirely possible. Did I answer both questions?
Yeah, and then, is there a way to, I don't know, I want to call it a union, but to get the local employers together in a way that if there was a plot of land, they could together maybe, support some kind of program like that? Do you see what I'm saying? Is because I think there's a lot of employers that would want to help their employees. But obviously we may need to figure it out collectively.
Yeah, the challenge is, as you've experienced, and the subcommittee before that, and the subcommittee before that, it's not easy to find spaces for the land. It's really a problem of the availability of land that could be functional. You absolutely could do an affiliated housing type project that was jointly done by 3 different employers. It's entirely possible. I will say though, it's probably not going to satisfy the state in terms of replacing the 50 units of very low income housing that I think this committee is primarily focused
Okay.
on achieving. The state, it's possible, but the challenge is affiliated housing doesn't have to be high density in order for it to be, in fact, it might be better if it's not. It might be, what Ladera is doing is not a high density project, but it's going to be income restricted. I'm sorry, Ladera Church.
Yeah.
And so that's the state, and as Carter has indicated, the state is fixated for various reasons having to do with the legislation, the way the legislation was written, but fixated on having zoning in place that has a minimum density. And that I think would be a deal breaker for someone like Alpine Hills or Prairie, frankly, if they said, hey, do you want to do some more, but it's got to be built at 20 units to the acre? I think that's the end of the conversation. And that's problematic. Is the state going to change that? No, not unless their state law changes, because the state law says that in order to be substituted for an actual deed restricted unit, it has to meet the density requirements. Now, in more urban areas, it's 30 units to the acre at the minimum. So because we're considered rural, we get the benefit of only 20, but it's very challenging to do in Portola Valley. So I ranged a bit on that, but hopefully that was helpful.
I noticed, and I know we're a little out of order, but I believe I saw another hand up. And I wanted to give you permission, a phone number ending in 7562. I think it's Caroline. Caroline, are you there?
Yeah, it's me. Yeah, thank you very much. These are great conversations, and if I may remind the committee, we have gone through this This is the third cycle, and I really appreciate everything that you're trying to do to accommodate. It's very important to ask questions. And I really concur with what Carter says. It has to be realistic. And ACD is completely contradicting everything that they want. It doesn't work in a town like Portola Valley. So, but let's assume that we're trying. I hope that you will reach out to these employers, because we have done the exercise ourselves. You know, we have talked to the construction workers. We have talked to the people at the gas station. Once they have a family, they don't want to be cramped in this little unit. So yes, you might have, if you take, for instance, Alpine Inn, you have the young instructor, tennis instructor, who wants to start building his career, and he has been asking for affordable housing. We have had experience with Woodside Priory. These are aspiring teachers, but for some reason they don't laugh. You know, whether it is because I can go into details, but you know, it might be because they don't feel like what they want to bring to the community is what they were told, and then they leave. So this whole affordable housing is temporary. If we can work it out, that's great. But we have to have a sense how this works, because Portola Valley is not accessible. So we have to make sure that once we provide these people with housing, they have to know it's not cheap to go shopping here. It's not, you don't have transportation, public transportation. And these are the things that we have tried for all these years to work out. And like I said, I really admire your enthusiasm, but these are all the things that we have to figure out before we really make this site available. And I totally agree. ACD is a disaster, and hopefully that will change in a couple of years. But yeah, these are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Okay, are there any other committee comments on this particular site? All right, we're going to move on. Then we're on 4A3, which is Portola Corridor Town Center update. And I have a very brief update on Christchurch, which is they are expecting their rough drawings next week. Keep our fingers crossed. And from there, in a couple weeks, mid-March, they will be meeting with their church leadership and figuring out and at least having more direction at that point. So they're hoping by the end of March, about the end of March, that they will have a better update. But I did want to share that with you, that they are proceeding, and they're hoping they get some good drawings that they can really figure out what they can do. Are there any other Portola Corridor Town Center updates? Mary?
Yep. Have anything?
Oh, I do have another appointment with Habitat for Humanity that had to be canceled, and that's coming up next week, I believe.
Okay.
And
Okay.
actually, I was thinking of, maybe it's relevant that I should invite Christchurch, but maybe it's not appropriate. No,
It depends on what the purpose of your meeting is.
I just want to find out whether they can help.
Okay. I don't, well, we
No.
can offline that.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have a question for that subcommittee. Christchurch is right across the street from Village Square. And I guess I just wonder if anyone has talked to either party about whether they should talk to one another.
I have talked to them about whether they should talk to one another, but I don't think that we're ready, ready to encourage that particular line of conversation.
I think the thought process is if Christchurch does, we don't know the number. That's the problem. Let's say they want to do 10 to 15. Can that offset the number that we might need at another site like Village Square? And I think that is something that's beyond the scope of our committee, and that has to go to council and then really get further explored at that point. Terrence, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, as long as the units are built at high density, I don't see a problem with, again, churches have different rules, right? So, and they're easier rules, but it's not necessarily a problem to have the 50 units spread over different locations. It is going to be harder to manage, right? So you're going to get an affordable housing developer is going to give you a lower bid for a project that's smaller because it's going to cost them more to manage it. And some affordable housing developers, in fact, most of them won't even touch a project unless it's, 40 or more units. But that isn't to say that none of them would. And it isn't to say that, that it isn't possible. You would, if you had 10 units at high density that the church wanted to do, you could do an RFP and see if there's a developer out there that's willing to do it. It will cost you more in subsidy, but there may be developers willing to do it. Particularly if particularly if it's ownership. If it's ownership units or long-term lease units, they don't require the level of management that a apartment unit does. For example, the Ladera Church site with being done through Habitat would not have any on-site management at all, except for the church members just, walking by.
So Terrence, if we're saying that a developer isn't going to touch anything unless it's going to be 40 units, then it says that we need to dedicate, 2 acres of land, someplace, and if we look at, the corridors, of, Alpine and Portola, effectively, every property, is either smaller than that, or it's already, been zoned, or, it's encumbered by some other deed restriction. So I'm trying to, as a layperson, with a planning background, it fascinates me, that somehow we're becoming, the whipping boy and the test child, because HCD is treating us like we're spoiled children. That we should be able to zone something, for this. And, I've discussed this, quite a bit, over the last, year and a half, 2 years. And we don't have land, that makes sense, to be zoned. Because there isn't a lot of vacant land that isn't already encumbered, by, open space easements or, open space restrictions, because the reason the town incorporated in the first place was to protect those open spaces, between, the orchard preserve, the agricultural preserves, and the open space district, and now post owning a 50% interest, in El Mirador Ranch, those are the greatest sources, of vacant land in town. But all of them, are either, well, both heavily encumbered by, general plan restriction, but also, by geologic restrictions as well. So it just, I mean, I'm at a point, where, except for, Village Square, I'm not sure where the next, really good solution, is, to obviate the need for, for Ford Field, being developed. I also think that, unless there are some, larger, political and economic, changes, in California, HCD is going to be even more venomous when it comes to, the next, round of housing element issues. I've discussed this, with other people, but I'm going to discuss it tonight, in open public, that if we are really adamant about, doing something, proactive, we need to find land, outside of, our jurisdiction and annex it. To actually do the kinds of housing and planning, that, would solve some of these, these housing issues. Because, what Carolyn talked about, in her public comments, about, a lot of these families, that are traveling in here to work, are, part of larger families that have, multiple incomes. And, the reason that they don't live here is not necessarily because they can't afford to live here. It's because their dollars go so much further, by traveling to work here. And that their employment here, is kind of like gold mine. You go to get the gold and then you go live where it's more affordable to live. And because I'm rambling and I'm sorry, but I'm exceedingly frustrated with the charge of this committee. Because I think this committee, has got quite a lot of horsepower and should be doing more than just trying to solve, for the 20 units of Ford Field. Because let me finish this. My opinion is that, go ahead and zone it, go ahead and do it, and there's not a developer going to come to do anything.
Just for clarification, when you say it, you mean the Ford Field site?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry for being oblique. I'm usually more acute,
Okay, Ronnie
but I'm not cute at all.
Krasinski has his hand up, and please let us share your opinions.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up question to Terrence. I was just wondering if you have a sense, with basically every jurisdiction in California now needing to develop more affordable housing, if there's a lot of kind of competition for the affordable housing developers, and with regard to finding someone to take on a smaller project, is that like becoming more and more difficult now that there may be opportunities for larger projects elsewhere?
It's very hard to say, but but there have been a proliferation of affordable housing developers. But the biggest ones, the ones that produce the most, do have sort of a program, and if it's not 40 or 50 units, they don't really want to touch it. But there are some out there, and you also don't have to be an established affordable housing developer to be willing to do some. For example, the Village Square owner who does not develop affordable housing generally, he's not affordable housing developer, is interested in doing something like that. So it's not to say there wouldn't be some interest, but yes, something short of that size would limit our options, would limit the number of people who would apply for it. But again, once more, what the town needs to do is to zone the property properly. The town does not have to wave a magic wand and actually develop the property. So in order to satisfy HCD, we need to zone property that can accommodate 50 units of high density housing. So I just want to stress that we don't have to buy the property. We don't have to actually see a nail driven into wood or concrete poured. We have to identify where they could go and zone it so that it's developable by right with our objective design standards. So sorry if I hammered that again, but I wanted to stress that.
And I'm not meaning to interject, Ronnie, but how many affordable, units, out of a 20 units an acre, would actually be required to be, listed, as either very low, or moderate?
Technically, none of them. It's one of the irrationalities of the state. We only need to designate the property at high density. They make the rather irrational assumption that anything built at high density would be affordable.
Well,
Yes.
sorry, Terrence, with regard to that, could you maybe clarify? I think right now you're speaking about getting a housing element certified, but 8 years or, at the end of the 8-year period, we'll, and along the way, we'll have the RENA assessments. And for that, I believe that, for something to count as very low income and for us to have satisfied our our RENA allocation, things would need to be deed restricted, et cetera. Is that right?
Well, no, not exactly. In order to count them, in order to count units as having met our RENA, when we do a new RENA, right? So we're talking about the new RENA. We're going to get a regional housing needs assessment that comes from ABAG. That's going to say we have to build X number of units. Let's say 100 for the sake of argument. But we also, just for the easy math, and we also we're also 100 units short. So our new RENA would be 200 that we'd need to find units for. But we still would only have to find places for those units. We don't actually have to develop them. Now, if we don't pursue it, if we don't follow the housing programs, and if we impose burdens that make it difficult to do affordable housing, if we were to put in a design process that was considered to be restrictive against housing, then the state is going to come down on us and potentially decertify us if we do any of those things. So, and I'm not hearing this community interested in doing any of that. I hear this community wanting to meet the requirements. And yeah, sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I do want to follow up.
Please, I was starting to ramble.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure we have the right impression. So for example, if we have a site in our housing element designated for 50 very low income units, and if, let's say, it is developed, but it's developed for moderate income, then I believe we'll face a known net loss situation, and we'll need to find another site for very low income. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
Right.
Is that but that is assessed at the end of this cycle into the next cycle? Is that what you're saying? Is that they would assess it at the end and then it rolls over to the next one?
Not exactly. This is a totally separate law that if you zone a property, let's say Village Square, if you zone a property for high density residential, and then a developer comes in and says, I'd like to do medium density residential, and you down zone it, you can't down zone without up zoning somewhere else. And that occurs at that moment. You can't down zone without replacing it somewhere else.
But
It-
Terrence, in the zoning ordinance, there's not an income limit, that shows up right now. You know, the income limit is in the housing element. It's not in the zoning. ordinance.
Correct. It's a density requirement, not an affordability requirement.
So so let's say a developer comes in and develops 50 units, but none of them are, very low income. Is that considered a no net loss? I mean, do we have to make up and find those somewhere else, even though the developer did the number of units that we said were going to be done?
No, you don't have to. It's not a no net loss question if the units are developed at the proper density. If you reduce the density, that's when you have to replace the density. You're not required to no net loss. Now, again, when you have your next housing element, if it turns out that that instead of low income and very low income, it was 50 units, high density, but rented at moderate income, then those units are going to be tacked on to your new arena. So just be aware. But when it comes to the no net loss, it's only about the density. And this again goes back to that irrational assumption that the state law makes that if you meet the minimum density requirements, it counts against your arena, with the assumption that if you build enough units at high density, they're going to be built at affordable rates, which is not true. But the state legislature, in their wisdom, has had that in the law from the beginning. And to be fair, HCD staff or at least policymakers, has indicated they don't like that. They would rather actually require that towns and cities provide affordable units, that they wouldn't be able to get out of it by simply zoning high density. But the law is the law, and the regulations are the regulations. So we need to find 50. We need a place where we can zone for 50 units. And I don't think we need 2 units. You'd indicate 2 acres. You indicated 2 acres. You could, if the village square, if the parking is not included in that, it's possible to do. Obviously, this requires the town to change its height limits, because our existing height limit is essentially 2.5 stories, 3 stories, maybe, if you look at it. So we would be looking at a 4-story product probably to make that happen. But anyway, back to that point there. The no net loss has to do only with the density lost.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Terrence.
Terrence, I have a question. On the 20 units an acre, is there our zoning ordinance, I know, has a minimum size. But what if we change the minimum size, so that we could distribute that density, to more parcels? Brings me to a point that I was making in my comments. Can I read that?
Yeah, because I didn't
A
quite
more
understand what you
sustainable
said.
approach would be to reduce the minimum parcel size for multifamily housing. This would avail single-family properties on the fringes, to carve out portions of their land as development opportunities. This would allow the current owners positive financial incentives without having to give up the Portola Valley dream. This would also reduce the stigma of collecting multifamily housing on larger properties. This would reduce the impression of density by providing more organic approach to development. This would also, improve the likely design solutions approach, since the developments would be on current owners' land, or at least it could be controlled by deed restrictions by the subdividers, to the subdividers' benefit. If a 1/4 acre parcel could be created without penalizing the existing owner's single-family opportunity, the development at 20 units an acre would probably be, appropriate, if you include the density bonus. And it would likely improve the town's potential for producing housing. The result of a 1/4 acre site, at 20 units an acre would yield 6 units and one low income unit. Very low income, one low income unit, or 7 regular units and one, very low income unit at the very low income, so my point is that, if you have, if we could avail opportunities, to develop at 20 units an acre, on a distributed basis, there are likely properties on the edges, that are not currently being used, that people could still have their Portola Valley dream, and potentially have some income opportunities. Because the issue right now with the way the zoning ordinance is written, is if you zone it that and you wanted to continue your single family, home on that property, you can't. You have a minimum density that you have to build, build to. You have to build 20 units an acre if you do anything. And that's why nobody was, in Portola Valley would want to do anything. Because the reason they came to Portola Valley in the first place, is to live the Portola Valley dream.
So there's no reason why that couldn't be done. However, you would need, in order to satisfy the replacement of the site, which is again, the task of this committee, to replace the Dorothy Ford site, you'd need to identify the number of locations that could fit. So that's a fairly tall task to be able to find people who were interested and find sites that you were willing to zone. The idea of allowing that is probably the better path to some affordable housing actually being constructed, but I don't think it's a good path to satisfying the state in this regard, just because of the complexity of finding all those numerous sites and having to look at each site and do at least schematic diagrams to be able to convince the state that this was actually realistic. But the concept is certainly better suited for Portola Valley in terms of providing some affordability and some density of housing. It certainly makes a lot of sense, but unfortunately, I don't think it works well to address this concern.
Yeah, Terrence, I have two questions. One, the opt-in program that's in our housing element has not yet started yet, right? Because our housing element has not been certified. Is that correct?
Our housing element is in effect for the town. It's not
Oh, so
certified.
somebody could do the opt-in program then? Have we had any interest in the
No.
opt-in program?
The opt-in program has not been defined yet.
Right,
Oh, okay, thanks, Ronnie.
There's no zoning regulations for it.
Okay,
right. But just to be clear, the housing element and the regulations in the housing element are in effect in the town. The certification is missing, which means the state will, can sanction us in various ways, including allowing builders remedy projects. That's the only sanction we're facing at the moment. But the housing element is the law of the land. It was never
Okay.
de-adopted by the state. So it is the law of the land, but Commissioner Krasinski is correct. It hasn't been activated because it would need to be refined and approved. But it
Okay.
could be done, and regardless of certification.
okay. And then to that comment though, SB 9, which is a parcel split, have we had any interest in that from residents?
Yes. We
Ha-
have some in progress. I don't know the number.
Okay, all right. So that is happening. Okay, thank you.
And of course, many ADUs are in process in the town.
Yeah, which is great. Okay. Yes, Jocelyn.
If what we need to do is rezone a parcel of land, why can't we rezone Hawthorne, the Hawthorne property, which is huge and been fenced off and not, nobody's been using it for decades? why can't we just, why can't we do that and then? But if the state and the town council and the town, the planning commission, if everybody wants spots to develop, why can't we do it?
Oh, no, it's a great question, but in the statement, it was brought forward, there's a conservation easement that prevents really anything happening on the lower parcel, or the parcel that's closer to Alpine, nothing could be built. And only the existing historic structures can stay on the other parcel.
But why can't we change that?
So we could rezone it, but it needs to be a feasible site for development. And it isn't a feasible site for development because of the conservation easement.
But how could we change the conservation easement if the town council, the planning commission and the state all want areas to develop?
In this,
Why can't we change?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, no.
In this case, the conservation easement is not to the benefit of the town. It's the open space district that holds that holds the open space, holds that conservation easement. They would have to do it, and it's against their charter. They wouldn't. And so,
So there's no one that can change that? Like the state can't come in and say,
no,
"Oh,
they cannot.
It's
That's
fine.
post, right? Peninsula Open Space Trust. So they could change it. It's just that they wouldn't.
Correct. They could change it, but they can't be forced. They can't be forced to change it. It's a property right that they have a conservation easement on it, and so that's why that can't happen.
So how can the state force that? I mean, the park was, you know, the park, you know, for, you know, as long as I lived in Portola Valley and I've looked at, you know, at the original plans, you know, for the town, you know, that land was, you know, intended to be preserved, you know, since they purchased it, you know, in 1907.
The state was able to force the town to designate properties that can build a set number of high density housing units, and 50 is what we're looking for. And they can force the town to find a location where that happens. And it has to be a feasible development. So you can't do it on an area that's right on top of an earthquake fault. You can't do it right in a riparian area. You can't do it where there's a conservation easement. The town is forced to designate that site.
I think we need to find the Ohlone Bowl. Because they're there.
The
so if I understand correctly, on Village Square, if 50 units were built, they could be at any affordability level.
Right.
And it would satisfy the replacement of Dorothy Ford Park. So if the developer were willing to do that at some mix of market rate and.
Agreed with all.
Can I comment? I mean, I think that's the. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I just think that's the wrong impression. If we put in Village Square into our housing element and we have 50 very low income units on there and it's developed in a different way, I think that we're gonna face a problem in needing to find alternative site at that time.
if it's developed at the same density, we wouldn't need to find an alternative site, but we would end up with a deficit when we did the new housing element that we wouldn't be able to count those 50 units because they weren't deed restricted, because we said in the housing element they were going to be deed restricted. But that
It's not only the new housing element, right? I mean, we're gonna need to report, I mean, first of all, as places are developed, there's the question if they're being developed in the right way, and aren't we going to need to report on how many units are developed in different income levels?
yes and no. So the requirement is to zone and to build at the right density, but the housing element indicates it's for low and very low. So yes, the state could ask, conceivably in the midst of that, but almost certainly it would roll over to the next housing element and be added to our allocation. The requirement is that the property be zoned for high density.
Which is why with Ladera Church, it was zoned for 10 and they're going to build 6. And there we have a net loss and we have to find 4.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, a follow-up. So, I mean, why then do we have this concept of 75 units at Village Square, 50 VLI and 25 AMI? Why don't we just have 50?
Well, Ronnie, because when we talked with Mr. Lowe, we said we needed to find 50 VLI. And that was the discussion that we had was how can we do 50 VLI to meet that requirement?
Yeah, let me be clear. The site that we put in needs to be at least, it needs to be feasible to do the high density with low income housing. So it needs to be feasible. It doesn't actually have to be produced that way, but there's no real penalty if we were to develop it at market rate, like, until later when we tried to count it, but it needs to be feasibly high density. It needs to be feasibly low income. So that's why there's discussion of more units.
And it sounds to me like an argument could be made that if we zone it to allow 50 units on the site, and that that's a density of at least 20 units per acre, that the feasibility argument is made at that point, and there's no need to, for example, go up to 75 units on the site.
Right.
Yeah, we would have to show sort of how the project would pencil out. We'd have to do a feasibility analysis so the state would accept it. So there could be additional units needed. But
And,
we'd have to get into the details.
and how is any of that feasibility analysis, taking into account the actual cost of construction, in the Bay Area right now?
It takes it into account. It also takes into account tax credit financing and other ways of reducing the cost. We are ranging a bit off.
Yeah, we are getting off
sure,
topic
Tom.
and I'd like to bring us back. But it's been very interesting. Thank you. I would like it to bring us back. We finished the site updates, but another thing that goes along with that is the master list. And Mary and Karen met as they had formed a subcommittee to develop the list. And Mary, did you want to give an update on that?
Karen and I went through all of the sites that we had discussed, and we actually got up to 52 sites that had been discussed and evaluated and reached out to people, which is twice what we had came in with. And we've done a lot of work here. It's also very clear that the privacy of those people we tried to pull their toenails out, it needs to be protected because it has been discussed with them. Those opportunities to go back to them with if there is a better offer or if there's something comes up as far as regulations, that will remain in place. So all these are viable and worth knowing about. And I think we've done a tremendous amount of work for the town in coming up with 52 sites that we have evaluated and we have identified who the contact people are, et cetera. That it is not necessarily because these are real estate things, it is not part of the public domain, and so it remains blacked out. But for future cycles, it could be very useful. And also answer to Jocelyn's point, it's all about other opportunities for making regular housing as opposed to just a 50-unit. So most of our work, even though we had that greater goal of 50 affordable units, most of our work ended up with 50, with just most likely at market or moderate. So I think that we've put the bones together for this housing element and probably for the next housing element. And I congratulate everybody on their hard work.
Thank you. One of the things I noticed, and we'll just it's a labeling issue, is for instance, you have 150 Portola as Portola, but our subcommittee was the Corners. So there'll be some relabeling, I think, that has to go on with this a little bit.
Do you think it has to, or did
I-
this no longer is the function of our committee? It becomes just what happened. It's not necessarily the subcommittees or, I realize it was not the plan, but I'm happy to relabel it.
Well, I think there's just an inconsistency between the lists that we were sharing in public and this list. And it's, I think, and I'm happy to meet with you because, you know, I just noticed where some of them were the Corners and such. I don't think it would take long.
There
And
is no
then-
corner division, and we also created the central district, and I don't know whether we can, and in public, we can speak to the question of the ones that are designated as central.
Well, okay, let me just,
belong to.
let me ask the rest of the committee on how they feel about this labeling. The Corners went away and they're now just whether they're on Portola or Alpine or wherever. Is everybody comfortable with that? With the new labels?
I am.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with that. I had a question. Town center buildings is listed here and I don't remember exactly what that is because the substation is a separate entry. So number 8, I don't know what that refers to. Substation is number 5 and the soccer field is number 6. So it's just a question.
Oh,
Okay.
Karen's
check
not
it.
here, so.
Okay.
But that's certainly a great question. Is it
There'll be
listed?
some refinement on this
Yeah.
list.
Yeah, but I'm okay with
Nice
this.
way of
I
putting
mean,
it.
because the address is there already, so we, in this, you know, the third column has the address, so I don't know that it matters which subcommittee, to me personally.
Okay, any other comments on this? Okay, just we're gonna move on to our SEC report to town council, but before we do that, because we have been all over the place, I just wanted to open it up for any public comment on what we've discussed regarding the master list and just prior to that.
No hands are raised at this time.
Thank you, Emily. All right, so we're going to move on to the report that we've prepared for town council. And what I thought we should do, because I'm thinking this could be the final time that we review this together as a group. And we should probably go through page by page and make any comments that we would like on there. So Emily, can you bring that up, please? And thank you very much to Ronnie Kruszinski for all the work he's done in putting this together for us. Okay. Title page, any comments?
Looking good.
All right. Let's move on to the overview page. I do have a comment as I was reviewing this. I think for a matter of clarity and people understanding that our committee is not a voting body. We are a recommending body. It might be good to change the word voting process to ranking process. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Ronnie, did you get that?
Yeah, I made the change in the slide later on. I forgot to update the
Okay.
overview.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Next slide. We need to update some of these numbers now. To make sure that we have the right number of sites. And some of them, Mary, on the new list,
My recommendation, just as it is in my business, is if you're gonna put a number, put it in only one place in the document, so you only have to change it in one place. So, I think the status here, shouldn't be talking about numbers. It should, refer to the list, for the sites, and move away, from, trying to put statistics in. Because as soon as you put a statistic in one place and not in the other, the whole document becomes obsolete.
Yeah, I mean, I've been enjoying saying that we have doubled the number of sites for consideration.
are there other comments on that? Any thoughts on?
Or you could just.
I
instead
believe
of
the
that-
numbers are accurate here as far as I
I would,
understand them.
I would change the last line, the last bullet, and say the AHSEC has considered over 52 sites. Period.
Well, that's in conflict with the second bullet point. Where it
Oh,
says
yeah.
a total of 31.
That's no good. Yeah, but it's, yeah, it's not accurate.
I've only seen 31 listed. I haven't seen 52.
Well, the master list that was included in the agenda packet, the new list has 50 sites on it.
And they do have an address, they do have addresses.
It has 50 sites, not 52.
Okay.
But that doesn't include Alpine Hills, does it? So are
I
we
think
good?
it does.
It does. That was in our original list.
Oh,
I
Why
don't
don't
thi- I
why
don't
don't we
think-
say,
I don't think this is a good use of our time.
yes, I agree. So,
I think that, I don't think you need to talk about the status at all. Except to describe in general what's happened, and that we've come to, some level of recommendations, and then lead the conversation to look at the lists, and to look at the ranking, and then do an executive summary, that says that this is what the ranking says.
well,
And
and
this is what our recommendation, from the committee would be. Because I think the wordsmithing around, whether it's a vote or not, we voted. And it's, there are votes of our ranking. And then whether it's 31 or 52, I mean, we've got one or two, that are actually worth talking about. I just think that, we've got better things to do than to deal with this. Because if this sheet wasn't in the report, nothing would change about the value.
right.
of the
And
report.
I agree with you, Carter, but because we're a Brown Act committee, we can't do this stuff offline. We have to agree to it in public. So I'm happy with removing this sheet because we have the executive summary later. But I don't know how others feel about it because we're a team.
Just removing the redacted sheet.
Removing
Okay.
this status page,
Okay.
page 12,
Great.
34. Everybody, okay, great. All right. The next sheet is the timeline. I think we should leave that in. And I need to change this so that we put March as our meeting with town council. And Ronnie, when you put in Alpine Hills on this next sheet, what did you mean by new TBD?
It's new and it's to be determined.
Okay, so we would just eliminate that, obviously.
If people want to include it in the report.
I think we should. I personally think we should include Alpine Hills. Jocelyn? Mary? Are you guys comfortable, Mary and Nona, are you comfortable adding Alpine Hills into this report?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any changes to 3350 Alpine Road? Any for the Skyline property, I mean Fogarty property? Great.
Wait, can you could just slow down, go back just a little bit? Okay. Is this specific enough in your opinion, Terrence? Because it seems like we're losing some of the granularity of the places where people could work, the number of commutes that would be cut down, that kind of thing. Shopping, schools, sewer. Yes, but we're talking about providing jobs and keeping people from having to drive from great distances and providing services that we need on the Skyline. Skyline is part of our town, and we can't ignore that. Well, you don't have to drive through the town to get to other parts of your town. It's our longest border.
If Terrence
actually-
is speaking, I can't hear.
Yes, you know, I'm gonna recommend you not go through the
Right.
re-ranking process. But
Okay.
but I think this is an adequate description. I don't think you need to say
Yeah.
more.
Okay.
Affordable housing being added to Portola Valley has those benefits no matter where you build it. No matter where you build it, you're gonna be reducing people's commutes. You're gonna create more opportunities. So I don't think you need to call that out here. If I can, if it's okay, Chair, I would like to make a suggestion that you focus your attention with the town council on the sites that are actually near the top.
Yes.
And do put them in order, if you can. Because I don't think the town council, in my opinion, should be spending a lot of time dealing with the ones that you've kind of winnowed out as not being worth pursuing, at least at this time. So I just wanted to make that recommendation as you're looking over this.
Okay, so why don't,
The other thing I don't particularly love about this is that sort of squiggly green line on the map is considerably bigger than we need for the affordable housing component, if that's what we're trying to show with that. And I think it's important that we generate a map that shows a 2-acre parcel so that we could have 50 acres up there. So
I
that we can-
disagree.
Mary?
I mean, we don't know what 2 acres to show, right? And it's noted on the bullet points, the 5 acres being green are what satisfy the safety filters. It's not.
Safety
it's not
filling.
saying-
Okay, that's different from, at some point, we need to generate a map that we can negotiate with open space.
the way I see this working is we're going to present to council, and council is going to decide whether or not to proceed with one or more of these sites. And when that happens, all of this detail and maps and working stuff out will occur with the appropriate staff and experts and individuals. So we are trying to present where we think we have feasible building sites for HCD. So, okay. Let's move, we'll reorder these at the end, to Terrence's recommendation. But let's move on to the next property.
And if I could be so bold.
Sure.
To even have a demarcation line where these are the ones you're recommending, and then spend much less time on the ones that you're not, and even provide an option to the town council to simply pass over that and start and talk about the recommendation. So we don't spend a lot of time talking about, because you guys have
Blue
done
Oak Street.
great work in narrowing these down and addressing some of the issues. I think you should honor that by making a recommendation of properties worth pursuing. You're not saying do X, Y, Z. These are properties worth pursuing. So, thanks for indulging my
Yeah.
opinions.
No,
So
thank
can I
you.
just understand, is the recommendation about this document that we submit, or is the recommendation about the live report in front of the town council?
So, after we get through this report, there is a main message points that would be if you will, an executive summary to council, and Terrence and I will meet to develop a presentation that follows those main message points. So we want to get to that afterward. But for the purposes of this report, this is supporting documentation, and we would just want to reorder it along with our recommendations. Does that make
So I
sense?
still have the question to Terrence. Terrence is recommending something, and my question is, you're recommending to potentially not cover or not include the sites that we aren't recommending. Are you recommending that for this report, or for either a different document or a live presentation?
I'm recommending it for the presentation. I would imagine the final report that you're probably going to be producing would follow something similar, but it wouldn't have to. But my recommendations are how you can maximize the benefit to the town council of the work you've done to point out your recommended sites.
Right, but I don't think you're suggesting that we remove sites from this report because they were voted down, right?
I am not. I'm suggesting that the presentation to council be focused on the sites that you are recommending.
Okay.
Yes, and we'll get to that in just a second, but we will reorder these slides.
I think that this should be an appendix.
Yeah, it will.
And that, the report itself, is 5 pages. This is what we did, this is what we've done, what we recommend. Because if we go through all of this, it's gonna be too late in the evening. The public is gonna go, what in the hell, is going on? And I think that, a committee will gain, respect and also, the recommendations will have greater power if they focus on those things that, that truly make sense to pursue.
Okay, my apologize, because when we get to the next section, you'll see the presentation message, and this would be an appendix. So I'm in agreement with you, Carter, and I think that maybe the order of doing this has confused some people. All right. So let's move on. Did anyone have any comments on the Blue Oak strip? Okay,
Except that it's
great.
wrong.
Christ Church, any comments? I just want to make sure it's our last time. Okay,
Gonna do it anyway, and it's probably not gonna contribute enough to even have it as part of
Okay.
this.
Town Center Substation strip.
No.
Okay, soccer field? Good. Hawthorns,
Doesn't include the place where all of us want the housing. The house is covering that up.
um, I didn't quite get that.
Well, it's underneath the,
Jocelyn and I have been, eyeing that land in the upper right-hand corner of the house, where it butts up against
Where the racetrack was.
racetrack.
Yeah.
And either the house needs to get smaller or move to a different place. Because the top of, the top of that slide, is all land that is not inside. So if that picture moved to the top,
Okay, Ronnie, did you get that?
Nope.
It's okay. The house should get moved and maybe it's a smaller picture to where over near the historic complex where it belongs.
I would make it, yeah.
Did that make sense?
No, it doesn't. I mean, that's not gonna work. It's just a picture on top of the map. I mean,
Can you just get rid of the picture?
I don't want to.
It's covering up the part where they think it should be, the housing should be on the map.
Can you just put it below the map with an arrow up to the historic complex? So it's clear it's in the historic complex.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to suggest one other possibility, which is to leave in conservation easement and historic designation issues, but then take out the clause that follows that, because there is wording in the conservation easement about keeping the current footprints and using the current buildings to the extent feasible or something like that. There is a small wiggle room window in there to amend the conservation easement or to, if, for example, the house couldn't be restored, then you could, I think, according to the conservation easement, replace it with equivalent square footage somewhere else in the historic complex. That's my reading. But I'm not saying insert that. I'm just saying,
Yeah, take out must retain because it's possible that it isn't a must.
well, they're talking about doing a conservation easement amendment
Okay.
already, I think.
oh yeah.
So is everybody comfortable with taking out the phrase after the hyphen must retain / restore current buildings, can't add new buildings?
I'm not.
I-
I think it's important context. We could take out the word must, maybe.
Yes. Take out the word must.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Okay, sold.
Maybe
And get rid of the word can't.
just say retain, restore current buildings. Would that be okay with you, Ronnie?
And get rid of can't add new
Well,
buildings.
Not really. I mean, I think that's like the most important constraint.
Maybe we could move on and I'll
Yeah.
just get the conservation.
Yeah,
easement
because,
amendment.
Right.
you
Okay.
know, you could say if, can't add new buildings if current buildings are maintained
Or without amendment of the conservation easement.
without amendment of the conservation.
Well, I mean, that's implied, right? I mean, the issue is with the conservation easement, which has these constraints. Of course, it could be amended to whatever, it's just that's not likely to happen.
The goal of the conservation easement was preservation. And it's, I mean, it's being demolished by decay. It's just gonna be gone. in genuine. And I mean, to me, you know, we need to send a signal, to Post, who owns the conservation easement. Because the founders of Post were mostly Portola Valley residents, that there's some obligations, that are probably coming due.
You can try. Good work.
What, could we just change this to conservation easement and historic designation issues surrounding current buildings? So it's broader and it's there, but it's,
Read the conservation,
I-
like.
I think,
And
sorry,
it's.
I can't hear.
I've read the conservation easement about a dozen times, and it gets into all kinds of, in the weed stuff. Like you can't upgrade the electrical service, you can't connect the sewer. You can't upgrade the water service, you can't, there's all these can'ts, that, frankly, if you were going to change this building, into housing, has to be amended. Because there's not adequate fire service, on the property. The building is gonna have to have sprinklers. The electrical service is gonna have to be upgraded. They'll have to abandon the septic system and connect, to the sewer. So, some of these issues and the reason that, there've been so many proposals by so many people, to help Mid-Peninsula do something with these, that all have gone by the wayside, including the ones that have been approved, because the conservation easement was seen as, not seen as, but it was actually an impediment to doing anything. And, if we're gonna respect the conservation easement, then we just need to take this off the list. Because it's not gonna happen.
I agree, and that's why I don't think we should sweep this under the rug. I think it's a significant issue.
Nona?
Wordsmith. I actually think that Karen's wording covered it.
Do we want to vote on the current wording?
I didn't hear
Conservation
the word.
easement and historic designation issues surrounding building, something like that.
If we're gonna
Uh,
wordsmith this, after the hyphen, say likely will, constrain the opportunities for development.
I'm okay with that.
Likely could strain, that's perfect.
Ronnie, did you hear that? That you just put likely constrain the opportunities for development.
Yeah, I don't really agree with kind of removing the detail of the constraints, because that's what's really going to make this problematic for being able to develop housing.
But the constraints are not limited to the buildings.
Can I just read from the conservation easement then? It says, so 3C goes on, and then it says that a repaired or replaced building shall not result in increased square footage and to the extent reasonably feasible shall be located in the same location as the building repaired or replaced. So if it's not feasible to locate it in the, where the building is being repaired or replaced, then it doesn't have to be. I mean, that doesn't even require an amendment.
Why would it not be feasible?
Too expensive and not within the,
You're not going to have a less expensive place on that site to develop housing.
Could Ronnie and Nona perhaps come up with language for this slide that you guys can agree on. Because I think, Ronnie, we are getting into the weeds here and that this is an appendix for what we're talking about, but when we know that there's a conservation easement, and so we realize there will be restrictions on what can be done, but we do know that Mid-Penn is considering sewer for the lower barn, so they are looking at ways to amend. They must be doing something with the conservation easement. Is that an appropriate thing to say? Yeah.
I'm happy with that, Ronnie, if you want to put our heads together on that. I just don't like,
I don't think it changes anything.
It doesn't really change.
I don't
Yeah.
think we need to
Yeah.
change it.
Let's just take out the word must. As we agreed. Okay. Village Square, any comments? Okay, moving on. Alpine Hills Tennis and Swimming Club. The only thing that I might add is just indicating that it's the lower two parcels that were discussed. I don't know, maybe that's self-explanatory, but it might help for supporting information.
I wanted to get rid of the last bullet from the very beginning. And I somehow the email didn't go through. So I've been asking for the last, I thought that was a breach of something. Was approached by a developer a year ago and declined. I'm not sure it was a year ago. I'm not sure what the process was or whether they were really approached or whether they got just a letter in the mail and that made them meet a couple of times. I just think we don't know enough about that bullet to include it. I think it's just.
It's up to your subcommittee on that one.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Is that okay with you, Ronnie, to remove the last dot? I tried to get you to do it before, but I didn't push send.
Okay. I did receive that, but it was after I'd submitted the.
You
update
did?
for the
Okay,
agenda.
good. Well, I did send send.
Okay.
So my
Okay.
second request.
All right. So we'll remove that last bullet point. Thank you.
I also thought the idea of having including the idea of having a parking structure with a tennis court on top was a good idea. And that was something they had actually come up with as an idea. And I did want to make sure everybody realized that this acreage is 4.5 acres. It is a fairly substantial piece of land. And if they did parking, it would both provide parking for the building as well as for the
Yeah, sorry, I don't think that's.
for the
last part.
membership. For the membership.
They
It
indicated.
would add
that-
a facility for the membership.
Yeah, but it would not be combined with parking for housing development. Parking for housing development would need to be self-contained within the housing development. That's at least what we discussed in our meeting.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
I don't know if we need that
in
level
general,
of detail because we don't know what would get developed
Well, I
there.
just want people not to feel immediately like they were losing their tennis court when they first look at this.
Well,
Well,
don't you
that's
think
why
the
it
bullet
says
point that's
no
there-
net loss
Okay.
of
All right,
recreational land.
fine. Just as long as you get rid of the last bullet, I'm fine.
Okay. Next slide, evaluation criteria. Oh, I'm sorry. Dorothy Ford, Park and Open Space. Any comments? Great. Evaluation criteria. Any comments? Okay. None of this has changed. The next slide, I did ask Ronnie to change it to ranking process instead of voting process. So people understand we're ranking. Okay. Now, Terrence, you recommend that we don't vote. Do you think we should not vote for the Alpine Hills site? Or with the group that's here, should we put our ranking in, I should say ranking in for that?
No, I think you should if you're gonna include it in the presentation. If
Okay.
the.
I hate to throw a monkey wrench into this, but I kind of loved this gradient of agreement designation as opposed to recommendations for alternate sites. How about just gradient of agreement on sites? Because that's the way it was referred to in the literature that came over from MROSD. And gradient of agreement is what it is. That's what we're talking about.
Well,
Not
every item that we
recommendations.
vote on is recommend, right?
I'm sorry, Ronnie, could you repeat that?
Every single
Every
thing is-
item, if you read the items, every item is recommend. That's the first word.
Okay.
I'm okay with the wording. But Terrence is recommending that the group here, that we do vote on Alpine Hills, and I think we need to come up with, do we want to come up with a number of units on this, just like we've done with everything else?
I'd suggest
Uh,
maybe 25 to 50 units.
Well, I think that's too high. I suppose what we could do is also say recommend Alpine Hills for further exploration.
Recommend,
My sense is this is a bigger quagmire than Hawthorne's.
And you can recommend accordingly.
then you get to
That's right.
recommend.
That's why we're here exercising our opinions. So does that work for everybody?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, we are going to go, starting with Carter on this one.
I abstain.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Thank you.
So it's recommend Alpine Hills for
Further exploration,
one.
okay, known as a 1. Jocelyn?
Sorry, can you unmute, please?
For the purposes of this subcommittee, which is to identify a 50-unit site that we can develop in the short term, I will give this one a 6.
Okay, I will give this a 1.
I will give it a 1.
Wait, hang on. No, Emily, I'm Karen A. And Karen Batra is not here, so.
Yeah. I'm 1.
And Ronnie,
3.
okay. Okay. So depending on how this all nets out, this might change. Okay, well, we'll go to the next slide. Ronnie, you had down there in the summary 3 and 4. That just needs to be for Alpine Hills. I think you copied and pasted.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry, I just fixed everything live on my copy. I have the votes and it now is 4-1.
Okay.
Sorry, what was the question?
So what's the average on Alpine Hills?
Average is 2.4.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so now we're on, the other thing that we did is, and we had this discussion in our meeting where we realized that the recommending the number of sites was different than looking at particular sites, and that our job was not to also evaluate Dorothy Ford, which is already there, it was to look at alternative sites. So these got moved to another page as supplementary information. So that's why they're put there. And I did have a question on this under the summary. It's 3 to 4. And Ronnie, is that because this is, your vote is below a 3? Oh, no.
You're talking
Yeah,
about the
no, I'm
last,
sorry, below a 4. A 3.5. Okay, all right, it's fine. I was confused. Okay, and I know we've been through this. Well, Carter, did you read your entire comments tonight?
And I think you guys should read it because I'm losing my vote.
Okay,
they were submitted written too, right?
Yes, they were submitted.
oh, they were submitted in writing. That's right. They are public records, so we can incorporate these into the thing. And you did cover a lot of your comments.
And
Here.
you can spell check it and grammar check it. Because it was more of a brain dump than it was well thought out.
Okay. And for the rest of you, do you have any, what I would ask is, do you have any comments on your comments? If you reviewed that. Okay, let's keep moving.
I mean, just to note, I may just add to my own, some brief thing to include Alpine Hills
Oh,
in my comment.
You know what? I'm really glad you mentioned that because I think we should amend our comments if we want to comment on Alpine Hills. Thank
And
you,
could we
Ronnie.
do that without it coming to public beforehand? I'd like to submit my comments too. Or does it, in other words,
I think, I think it's okay. I think I would suggest maybe if we're taking another vote or something on submitting this, we could just say with further revisions, and I can incorporate those revisions. Perhaps I'd be a subcommittee with Karen Askey and forming the final submission materials for the council.
I think that sounds good because I think the individual comments are your individual comments, so you should be able to provide those later. Okay. Last page. And Ronnie, did you, well, the question now is what questions do we have, or should we even keep this in? And I'd like to recommend that we wait on this page for our questions to council because we need to review the main points. And we have, at the end of this, we ask for next steps from council. And perhaps we don't need this last slide. Ronnie, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I think we could cut it if you want to replace it with something, some other points from your write-up. We could do that.
Okay. Oh, Nona? Okay. So sorry. Okay, let's move on now to something completely new. Thank you guys for your patience. I realize if we weren't a Brown Act committee, we could do things like this without having to spend the time in the public meeting. So, but I appreciate your patience. So I just want to cover the main message in what would be the executive summary and the presentation that Terrence and I will put together following your approval for our council meeting on March 12th. We want to cover what the core mission of the committee was, which was approved in September of 2024 by the town council, which was to provide the recommendations on potential alternative sites to Dorothy Ford Park and open space and opportunistically identify potential alternative sites for replacement to a site currently included in our housing element that may not be built in this cycle or as potential housing sites in future arena cycles. So the work that we've been doing with all the sites will carry forward. And this is direct wording from the council presentation. During the process of evaluating housing sites, the committee will leverage the work performed by the Town Council Outreach Subcommittee, as well as prior town committees that focused on housing in Portola Valley, including the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee of 2021, the Ad Hoc Committee on Town-Owned Properties, and other existing resources. Encourage public participation in the discussion and evaluation of such sites. Publicly communicate information on its progress and recommendations. We would then review the timeline and reiterate that the council had approved the committee formation in the third quarter of 2024 and the completion of our efforts in the third quarter of this year, 2025. We go over the committee members and all your dedication to the town. Thank you. Progress to date, holding our first meeting, the interviews in October and the members appointed at the end of October, the first meeting on November 19th, the subcommittee formations that we had, how we worked, and then the meetings that we've held to date. Also, that we're continuing the outreach, and here we would have to change this date, and maybe we just take the date out, that we're continuing or we continued through today. And here we talked about, I think we should say over 50 sites, Mary, to your point, and we take it out of the other place, and we will have the master list attached. After these site owner discussions, our analysis focused on 9 potential sites because we're going to include Alpine Hills. And this would be to replace Dorothy Ford Park and open space. The hours, I think, quite honestly, I forgot to include Patty's hours in this. And this is from the committee hours. And then with this meeting, as well as the meeting that the Alpine Hills subcommittee had, is probably about 450 hours now. Thank you all for giving me that. And we, as we said, we've developed a master list, and that there's been strong committee work ethic and cooperation as evidenced by these long meetings. And here's where we have our proposed ranking. We talk about, we used the tiered ranking system of the 9 site options modeled off of the Mid-Penn Ad Hoc Working Group. Here is where I believe this might be 5 potential sites now, because I looked at the ones in the chart that were above 3 or 1 to 3. And that included Village Square, Fogarty, at all the different types of units, Christchurch and Hawthorne's for 5 units. And with Alpine Hills, I think we would also include that for further exploration. How do people feel about that?
Well, I think if we're trying to find a site for the 50 units, I'm not sure how a lot of those would fit into that category.
So there could be a combination put together. And so then, and again, the town has to look at all these options and figure out what's going to be feasible. So these would remain on the list. The council may choose to say, just like you're saying, Jocelyn, no, we've got to just focus on the 2 that can give us 50. But they might decide that they want to see what happens with Christchurch and Fogarty. or Christchurch and Village Square, because we still need a lot more information. That's my impression. Does anyone want to add to that?
What's the question that you're asking? I mean, I guess the way I see it, we have our recommendations, we have what we voted on, and I'm not really clear what the need is to go beyond that.
You need to add Alpine.
This, Ronnie, to
Alpine is
answer,
in there.
to answer your question, this is to bring the ones to the surface to the town council that we believe have feasibility. To Jocelyn's point, some of them are not feasible for 50 units, but it's going to be the council that decides whether to move forward in exploring it.
So
for
we've already
options.
voted, right? I mean, we've already voted, so you can, if you want to call the list, just pick the ones that have more support than more people supporting than not, right?
Yes, and that's what these sites listed are, and we would add Alpine Hills to it.
This is maybe I don't understand quite what this is. Like it was labeled as a memo. And so I guess what I've understood is that you would submit this as a memo to the town council agenda packet along with our report. And I guess I was assuming that you would present the slides that we've been working on. Is that not your plan? It sounds like maybe you're planning to create a third document.
When I met with the subcommittee, the request was that we prepare a presentation and an executive summary that would talk about the committee process in general, as we've been going through, and our recommendations, and that the report is, I wouldn't call it an appendix, but it's supplementary information to that. Terrence, do you want to speak to that?
Not exactly.
Okay.
No, it's really up to the committee. I understand Commissioner Krasinski's concern. And we've been sort of talking different things. The question is, what are you going to be presenting to the council coming up? Is this the outline for that presentation? And what were the slides that you were working on before? Sorry, I turned a question around on you.
No, that's fine. My impression is that we would have the report, obviously reordered with the sites that came to the top of the list first. And then we would have this memo, and the actual presentation would more or less, in my mind, be these bullet points, as well as the slides from the winning properties.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
It does. And so just so I understand, the slides would look like slides before is actually the report that you're looking at bringing forward. We were going through the slides that Ronnie had produced. That's part of the report. You wouldn't present that directly.
Correct. That would be but there would be the slides of the properties that rise to the top would be in the presentation.
That I think that works, and that maximizes the town council's time in reviewing and giving feedback about to both back to the committee if they want you to look more and or to staff to start reviewing those projects, those properties. Sorry.
Okay. So there would be both this executive summary and then a presentation that would basically be covering the executive summary.
Are you taking comment?
Please.
I think we should add, I raised a suggestion that we add Rebecca Flynn's ADU committee to the resources that have gone into making our.
I'm
Under
sorry, I
the-
didn't follow
Under
that.
this section where you talk about all the good work that's gone before, that we add Rebecca Flynn and Patty's ADU committee. Damn right, because they did work hard on this.
Okay, I took the wording straight from the town council directive.
Well, they forgot,
Well,
and I think it'll make Rebecca Flynn feel a lot better if her, if they.
I will mention that verbally. How's
I
that?
put it on there.
Well, okay,
Okay, you can do whatever you
all
want.
right.
but
I will make sure that we do that, but I wanted to review what the council approved.
Yes.
Okay.
And then you'll just mention it.
Yep. Okay,
Can I make a point of order?
absolutely.
I move, that, a subcommittee, of, the chair, Ronnie, Kravinsky, and, Nona, finish up the authorship, of, the report, the appendix, and the, executive summary. Because I think we've, the value of wordsmithing this, is,
Yeah.
is lost.
Okay,
And I think it would be much more effective, if a subcommittee, does that. That's my motion.
okay. I think that's a good
Second
motion.
it.
I want to make sure that everybody
Do we have
has,
any discussion?
sorry, Ronnie?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna ask if we have still opportunity for discussion here.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure that everybody had read this. And if they had any comments on it, because the subcommittee needs those comments in public and to put them in. And Ronnie, go ahead.
Oh, I don't know. I guess, I don't know if I'm in the minority, but I would rather not come up with a third document, which is a presentation. That I'm fine with this being a memo in front of a presentation, but I would just use the slides that we've reviewed and maybe skip over some for presentation to the town council. That would be fine. I mean, maybe add, I guess, a couple based on these bullets, but seems overly complicated to me to come up with 3 different documents.
Why don't, I like the idea of the subcommittee recommendation and we can discuss it. And how we would, I believe Judith Haskell has raised her hand.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, just by way of explanation, while I've been listening into these meetings, not all of the council will have. So the purpose of the third document isn't to rehash what you've otherwise presented, but it is to summarize the work at a high level that you've done to, give whatever level of preview and explanation you feel is appropriate as the committee to how the process worked. Because you've all been following this minute by minute, hour by hour, but the public who listens in to the presentation to the town council will not have done that in large part. And so if you're working on what the substance of this should be, my recommendation is to think about it if you've never not been familiar with what the council's directive was or what you've been doing, what high level, not details that are repetitive, but high level framework do you want to set the stage for to then present the documents that you've already prepared and are modifying this evening. I don't know if that helps, but the thing that was missing, if you just put the slides up, is allowing the town council to read in written materials kind of an overview of the process and the task, and then to drill down right away as you present into the subject matter details that are going to be frankly complicated for people who have not been listening in. It's up to you how you want to do that, but that is, as a town council member, what I think could be useful.
Thank you, Judith. Does that clarify everything, Ronnie? So I'm happy to have this subcommittee and we can finalize everything and Terrence will meet with you as well, since you'll be in on the presentation.
Of course. if you
Yeah.
wish.
Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor.
Uh,
And that
if-
motion was, that Nona and Ronnie.
And Karen.
And Karen.
Okay. Karen A. Karen A.
You're pretty close to
Motion?
a second, it's been first
Okay.
and second
Oh,
already.
all right. Okay.
And, yeah.
Okay. Vote?
Karen Askey,
Aye.
Mary Hefty,
Aye?
Ronnie Krasinski,
Moment.
Yes.
okay. Carter Ward,
Yes.
Nona Chiariello,
Yes.
Jocelyn Gray, Karen Bottra's absent. Motion passes.
Okay, so to that end, does anyone, if you've read through the memo and we should talk about the questions because we're taking them out of the report, is, where do we go from here? What we see is the council discussion and the decision on next steps, including but not limited to feedback on and follow up on site recommendations and rankings, further information desired, follow up with chosen site owners and how that's done, and continued outreach efforts, question mark. And obviously to then provide the direction to the planning staff and our group as appropriate, or other people. Okay. I apologize that this is like slogging through something. And I wish there was an easier way to do it. Thank you. Okay. Are there any comments from the public?
Currently, no hands are raised at this time.
Great. Okay. So we're on to item D, which was the formation of subcommittees, and I believe we did that. Excellent job. Next steps, I believe, are that we get together and we'll finalize the report, the presentation, and the memo. Get that done. So we are on to item 5. I don't believe there are any committee reports or further information. And Terrence, do you have any updates?
I do.
Oh, goody.
In order to comply with the state housing element, we need to address their technical assistance letter. I like how they call it assistance. So we have scheduled that for March 19th for the planning commission and April 9th for the town council to consider doing that so that we can get our housing element back in certification. I want to stress, and I'm going to stress it many times, the town owns that property. Nothing will happen on that property without the town council's decision to go forward. The zoning does not, the zoning removes a step that would be needed to move forward, but it does not dictate that anything happens on that property. So I just want to be clear about that. And so that is the process that we're going to. By the way, the state passed a new law and unrelated to this, but well, whatever. that now any zoning change has to have a 20-day review,
Oh.
publication period rather than a 10-day publication period. So that's part of the reason why we can't move this a little bit faster, but that is coming forward. There is a second reading for a zoning ordinance as well, so it wouldn't be until April 23rd that we were able to get this done and transmit it to the state. I've been in contact with them. I'll continue to be in contact with them so they know it's coming. With that, I'm happy to answer your questions about that, but I don't have any other further reports.
Thank you. Any committee questions? Okay. Last chance for any comments from the public. We put them all to sleep tonight. All right. Meeting is adjourned at 8:35. And I will let you know if the next regular meeting will happen, but at this point, I don't see the need for it. Thank you.